Do you have any advice for Norwegian mothers thinking about home birth, but still can't really decide to go for it?
Well, I would say that there must be some kind of an forum of mothers who've already gone for home birth, and I think what I did when I was studying about home birth is I talked to those who had had them, and I learned a lot from that. I learned that one woman didn't even know she was in labor, and her husband had the labor instead with her first baby, and she just sat on the toilet and the baby fell out. And then I talked to another one who lived in a place where people thought you shouldn't have any privacy, and she had 45 people that wanted to be there, and she said that she was sure that's why it took 2 days. I learned a lot of really good things from talking to those mothers that formed, that helped me make up my mind what I would do in the future, who I would want there, and and who I wouldn't want there. So that's what I would do.
Yeah, I would do the same thing. I think these days you have a lot of resources at your fingertips, as far as the internet and books and, just different videos and things like that where you can educate yourself. I think that's one of the big things is not just the mothers, but the couples, the mother and the father, educating themselves and what do they want? What kind of a birth do they want? And just, you don't give birth very many times, so it should be what you want and how you want it and with who, you want to be there.
I would add one other thing, too, and I often send people to YouTube because there are certain animal births that are good to look at. And I think if you're pregnant and you're thinking about this, you should go carefully because you can see some things that would be frightening to you, where animals, too, could be mishandled. But two very good ones to look at are The Dramatic Struggle for Life, which shows an elephant giving birth in captivity. That's excellent. And I think it's empowering to a woman because she starts to feel like the same nature that made the elephant and the instincts that you see the mother bring to that getting her baby breathing could possibly be present in you too. Another good one is Chimp Birth Attica Zoo, Attica, Attica Zoo, and that shows a primate giving birth. And then another one is wonderful, is Happy Birth, all one word, Happy Birth, MP4. And that one is lovely. That's a woman giving birth in France, and I really recommend those three.
From your point of view, what is the main reason you can recommend home birth to a healthy woman?
The freedom to be yourself. If you are the type who has a certain confidence in your body, that it kind of knows a lot. It's gotten you through so far, and you have an awareness maybe of the long line of your ancestors that had home birth. I mean, almost every one of our ancestors did that. If you think about it, it's obvious, but not so well known in our everyday awareness. So if you're that type of person who doesn't like to have to get things done according to someone else's schedule, and if you'd rather not have, the interruptions that are common in most institutions, and I can't say that I know a lot about Norwegian hospitals, but I mean, all large institutions have their ways that they try, they run things smoothly. But there's such a large variety in the way we give birth. And mostly it works best when you have a private space, in a sense of that being your space, that you have some say-so about who's there and what works best for you. Because sometimes the entry of certain people in the room can actually stop your labor, certainly can slow it down.
many Norwegian partners are skeptical to home birth. How can the mothers-to-be talk with them and make them feel confident about home birth?
Well, we have wonderful technology for showing how well birth works. And when people make home birth videos, and photos, these are certainly been instructive to lots of doctors. In fact, if we think about the innovations that have taken place in maternity wards, in Europe and North America, these were introduced in home birth. I mean, the presence of the daddy at the birth, if he wishes to be there, that came from home birth pressure. The late cutting of the cord, the upright positions and movement in labor. I know back in 50 years ago, there was a lot of walking that was permitted in labor wards, but since you had CDGs and electronic fetal monitors, and you've introduced that type of technology and lowered the staffing of the midwives, who used to be there all the time, giving that human presence and listening to the fetal heart in labor. So now you've got fewer midwives. They're taking care of more than one person in labor typically, and it just gets less personal. So these are some of the things, the good, let's make it pretty, let's give you some freedom, let's let you have a birth in water if you would request that. These are innovations that came from home birth. And I worry a lot that if we shut off the possibility of home birth or make it just something that the bad women do, that we forget. And we forget what physiologic birth is. We forget how all of our ancestors gave birth. And that's not good. In the U.S., we've forgotten some really important things in the last 50 years, I can tell you that.
And Carol, should we recommend home birth, or what do you think?
Yes, personally, I think the woman I don't know about recommend. I think the woman has to make up her own mind. I think you can educate the woman and educate her partner, and you can help with that education. You can lead them in the right direction of finding information. Some families like simpler things, and some families like actual scientific evidence-based research. There's definitely plenty of that around. I think it's important for the women and the couple to work with somebody who trusts birth themselves, and who trusts that it's really the best place for the woman, and to know if something does come up where they're not real comfortable, they will go ahead and transport to the appropriate place and get that, whatever the situation happens to be, taken care of. But I think everybody feeling comfortable with the decision. I know Ina May and I both had our first ones in the hospital, and we knew we weren't going back to the hospital, that we felt like the care we received back in the 60s was not really appropriate at all, and we felt more comfortable doing it with our friends out of the hospital. That felt like a safer option than going back to the hospital.
We weren't afraid of pain.
Right.
I didn't have really anything that I would call pain. I felt a lot of energy. Carol, she almost died of aspiration pneumonia, so that was pretty scary. So she was so happy having her first one out of the hospital. I don't think pain was anything that we just breathed deeply and.
So what is actually home birth about?
Well, it depends a lot. What is it about? For us, it was an escape from something had been quite frightening and traumatic, and in actual fact ignorant. I think most Norwegian physicians, if they had looked at what we were dealing with, they would have been horrified that the doctors in the United States would have been so ignorant that they were putting forceps on 67% of the women that gave birth the year that I did. And they were feeling like that was scientific. So the fact is that some doctors can think they're scientific when they're actually not being that way, you see. And so if you have any sort of respect for nature, and if you look more widely at what nature does, you know, when we look through the other species of mammals and see that nature generally had it pretty well figured out. So maybe we need to look a little more deeply at what natural laws are. And I think a big one that was forgotten in the United States in maternity wards, without midwives having any input at all in the design of these maternity wards, was the law of gravity, which is kind of a big one. If I usually get very blunt here and just say if we're going to get something big out of the body between the legs, generally we don't think that lying on the back would be very helpful. And while some people actually can do it, and will choose to do it that way because they are, you know, have a capacious pelvis and good strength and everything, that doesn't mean everybody can do that. So, you know, that's just one example. I could do many, but we don't have time for that.
Yeah.
Do you have any message to the Norwegian pregnant women out there?
Educate yourself and trust in birth, trust your body. You know, we have this saying, your body's not a lemon, your body works well. Give it a chance to work.
And let's explain what we mean by lemon in that expression in English, because it means it's the machine that you bought that is never going to work. It's always breaking when it's new. And the Germans call it a Monday car, a Montagsauto. And so your body is really not one of those. You're really highly evolved to be able to give birth. And so it's a matter of finding in what conditions does your body work the best. So I would also say inform yourself well, and then bring your sense of humor with you when it's time to give birth, because if you can laugh, your body actually makes an opiate that's very, very powerful. But you have to lighten up and not feel sorry for yourself in labor. And when you discover the energy there, I think you can find it's very healing and brings a lot of wisdom.
Thanks a lot.